A state representative wants a teacher fired over a controversial classroom assignment about President Trump. Here's the assignment in Goose Creek ISD that has Representative Briscoe Cain so upset. 7th grade students were asked to write essays on a series of passages to help them practice a point of view. But the essays are critical of Trump. One was titled "Trump Against American Values." One of the multiple choice answers to the essay is, quote, "Donald Trump should not be president." The district tells us clearly the teacher did not use good judgment or review the materials that she received from an outside source thoroughly. Like all of us, teachers are human and make mistakes. We've talked to the teacher about it, and they make mistakes from time to time, and that's the end of it.
Here's something you might not